I'm here with the producer, Vanessa Gilbert, of the new film, The Verge, and today we'll be asking her some questions, so let's get ready to start.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to give you a little insight on The Verge and the questions you have today.
Our first question for you is, how does your product use common conventions or challenge them, and what social groups or issues does your product represent?
So my film, The Verge, was a horror film, so it followed a lot of conventions found in the horror genre. And I did a lot of research in these conventions, and I followed some closely and some really not at all. Some of them that I did follow closely was the type of shots, the music, and the costumes. For specific shots, I would do specific angles. I had low angles, I had point of view angles. The low angles were used to show how powerful the character the low angle was done on, and how insignificant you as the audience was compared to that character. They had all the power and you had none. And this kind of just enhances the fearful. The audience feels helpless. The audience feels as if they have no power. Another example, this was in the point of view shot when the person was typing on their phone, and this just kind of immersed the audience in the film at an early point to help prepare them for when the suspenseful and fearful parts come around. They still feel like they're that character. They still feel like they're part of the film and they're in the setting, they're in the same situation that character's in, and they feel everything that character feels. So I think shots was something I kind of followed a lot because I really think it helped create a connection between the audience and the film. Another convention I followed was when it came to costumes. My main character wore black sweatshirt, dark sweatpants, and kind of followed along the very stereotypical suspicious person who was trying to blend in very boring dark clothing. So I think that convention really helped show the audience who the main character was, who the villain was, and kind of allowed them to think on what will happen next and be really interested and suspicious on what will keep happening. So one more convention that I followed was music. I used a lot of non-diegetic background noises to kind of enhance the feeling during silent parts of the film. And I used this to create sound motifs and many other things. And this non-diegetic noises and sounds kind of went along with the scenes. When the climax would start reaching to a point, the audience knew that something was about to happen. And they were suspenseful, they were fearful, and they were just interested in what would happen next. So I was really happy I followed those main 3 conventions, although I followed a couple more. Those are the main 3 ones that I think were really important in really creating that fearful and suspenseful feel and making sure the audience got that feeling. Some conventions that I didn't really follow as closely were lighting and certain non-diegetic sounds. This went with when I made some non-diegetic sounds, and the background noise was very happy and joyful and safe, and it kind of made the audience feel like they were safe. And I really love that part in the horror film because in the beginning the audience felt safe. They felt like they were happy, they were joyful, and like nothing could hurt them until that switch happened with the editing, the scene cut, and they started to realize they're not safe. There's a villain out there, there's suspicion, and they're just suspenseful for what will happen next and what's going to happen to the characters and just what's happening in the film. So I think that was really good in just keeping the audience fearful for what will happen for the characters. And another thing I didn't really follow too closely was the lighting. I did have some difficulties with lighting, however, I used some editing and touch-ups to make it kind of seem like dusk, sunset, which isn't exactly the time that you would normally see horror films. However, I think it really still got the message across that the audience has to expect the unexpected. They can't think it's going to happen at dark, it's going to happen in the woods. They have to understand that murders can happen anywhere and that these suspenseful acts and the things that they're afraid of in this film can happen at any time, not just the expected times. So I think that my specific film kind of represented people struggling with mental issues. Although the film really amplified it and showed it on an extreme level, I think it kind of showed people who were struggling. The killer in this opening sequence has mental issues. They are killing people. There is something wrong with them that they feel as if they have to kill others. And although this is on a huge spectrum and not as normal as you would see on realistic levels, it is a problem that many people face realistically, where they struggle with mental issues and anxiety, and they feel like they have no gateway. They feel like no one understands them, and they have this struggle inside of them that they don't think anyone else understands. And I think that my film kind of represents that on a huge spectrum, where this killer has mental issues, they have problems, they feel as if no one understands them, but their gateway is killing. However, normal people just suffer with anxiety, depression, and it just really exemplifies this social issue that a lot of people face on a huger scale. However, it's a realistic and pressing issue on many people.
Our next question is, how does your product engage with the audience, and how will it be distributed as real media text?
So the main way my film engages the audience is through non-diegetic sound. The non-diegetic sound kind of walks the audience through every single scene and kind of keeps them interested and engaged in what will happen next. When the non-diegetic sound starts reaching a climax, the audience knows something will happen. They are fearful, they're suspenseful, they're just tense on what will be happening because they know something big's about to happen. The same thing goes for when the music falls. However, the audience at the falling point still knows that right when that music starts climbing, something else will happen. So my audience is engaged through the non-diegetic sounds and through the type of editing used. When there are sharp cuts and transitions from one scene to the next, the audience is intrigued and wondering what just happened. Why is this so sudden? Like, what is going to happen next? And I just think that overall, the non-diegetic sounds and the editing I used kind of just keeps the audience really engaged in everything that's happening in the scenes, regardless of what angle it was shot at, who's acting in it, if it's the killer or if it's a different character. It just keeps the audience engaged on almost a subconscious level because they just hear the music and they're engaged in the music, they're engaged in the scenes and the visual aspects, and overall I think I did a great job at engaging the audience. So when my film will be distributed, it's going to be through a lot of streaming programs. Through this time especially, a lot of people have gotten streaming programs, a lot of people have stopped going to movie theaters, they've stopped with cable, and we're trying to reach as huge of an audience as we can with the least amount of money spent. So we're going to hit a lot of streaming programs where people can watch them from home, and that's when it comes very important that my film kind of engages the audience and makes them feel the fear on a personal level. They don't have to be in a theater in the pitch black to feel what the characters feel in the film. So the film will be distributed a lot through streaming services. However, it will be shown at a small amount of movie theaters and a couple times on cable, just to make sure everyone can reach it. And there will be advertisements on YouTube, trailers, and just so many other things, just to make sure that everyone gets the word.
Now we would all love to know, how did your production skills develop throughout this process?
My production skills have grown so much beyond just, oh, I know how to edit, I know how to film, I know how to shoot, I know how to plan. My production skills have really grown. One thing I really learned and I really loved was the fact that when I would start shooting, even though I planned a storyboard, I would see these small, insignificant clips. They had no audio, nothing was really happening, and in my head it's like, how can this become this vision and this plan I had in my head that almost my storyboard couldn't even really understand? Like, how could I get this one clip, get my whole vision through it, and make sure the audience still understands what I'm trying to do? So once I have all my clips and I would edit them, I would put them all down, I realized that these small, insignificant clips in my eyes could become this amazing vision that I had before. And although, yes, I had to tweak some things, I had to edit some things out, it all still came together exactly the way I wanted. So that is one thing that I think my production skills grew, was more of a mentality that it's a process. It doesn't just go from great to great. It goes from step to step to step to step to create something great. So that was one thing I think that my production skills really changed. And actual technical aspect that my production skills grew in was when I was layering audio. Before, I only knew how to add a voiceover or add one clip of audio. However, through editing, I learned how to add non-diegetic background noises while still having the diegetic noise up in front and loud for the audience. I also figured out how to record my own sound effects and audio and layer them into that and change the volumes to make sure that at that specific moment in that scene, the audio that needed to be heard was the loudest, and it wasn't too clustered and noisy and altogether. So adding diegetic and non-diegetic sounds was really a huge part that helped me grow my production skills when I was editing them and adding them in, because that was something I learned, and it was a huge help, because before that my film just felt like a bunch of muted scenes with a couple audio there, some audio there, diegetic noises there, and dialogue. However, once I was able to add that non-diegetic background noise throughout the whole film and layer a bunch of audio, it really came together and really felt like you were part of there and you were in the experience while watching the film.
How did you integrate technologies into your project?
So technology was such a huge part, and it wasn't just when I was filming, when I was editing. It was also a huge part before I even started storyboarding, and that was when I was researching conventions. I was researching colors that went along with horror conventions, and just everything that would appeal to horror films and the audience watching these horror films to really help them connect, especially because of the way I would be distributing my audio. However, I used technology a lot when I was researching, and when I started my storyboarding process, I used technology to draw some online sketches. However, I did end up using paper and pencil to finish off all the sketches. Another time I used audio was during my filming process. Yes, I used a camera to record all my scenes that I had and all my shots, but there was one specific scene when the person was texting on the phone that I had to use 3 pieces of technology.
This is the scene I was talking about.
To get that filming done, I had to use a camera to record, a phone to be in the actual scene, and a phone to send the text message to the phone that was in the scene. And up until that point, I never really understood how important technology was in this scene. Just to have a phone in the scene, I had to have 3 pieces of technology, which is something I kind of really understood on how much it takes just to have technology used in your actual filming and in your actual scenes. Because before it had just been used for editing, it had just been used for filming. But once I started to use it in my actual scenes, I realized how important and how valuable it was. Another time I used technology, which was a huge important part, was during my editing. Besides putting the clips together, adding non-diegetic and diegetic sounds, adding sound effects, was what really put together the whole film. And without the technology and the software I used, which was iMovie, I would have never been able to add all those things together and really make the film that I really wanted to make and have my vision portrayed, because by watching scenes you don't really get the full message until you add the audio.
And that's all the questions we have today. Thank you for joining us. You gave us some great information.
Yes, the pleasure was all mine, and I had such a great time sharing my filming experience with you guys, and I really hope you guys all enjoy The Verge.